And today, whether Uber will retain its licence to operate the taxi app firm. Remember, in the past it's had licences that's granted it a number of years. It had a temporary one for just 4 months. What will happen? You might know more later in the hour. But we start the hour by welcoming to the studio someone who, credit to him, through tough times has come and seen us. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS as is known, Ross McEwan. Remember, you and I, we own some 70-odd% of it, still publicly owned, in the aftermath of that banking fallout. But I have to say, for the first time I can recall that the Chief Executive has been coming by, he's made my life a little bit more difficult because, Mr McEwan, welcome to the studio, we can actually see that you've turned a profit. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. And this is, I think, the first time I've been on the show, and in our first 6 months we've made some money.
Yes.
But can I just be a little bit warning? We certainly have one big bill to come, which is out of the United States, to do with some activities back in 2005.
Do we know the size of that bill?
No, we don't. And
do you
therefore
have to set aside X million?
Well, we have got some money provisioned aside. Whether that's enough or not, we just don't know until we've got into negotiations.
Is it public knowledge how much you've set aside?
Yes, it is.
How much
just
is it?
Over $3 billion American dollars, and we're waiting. We have to get into conversation to find out how big that bill will be. And
when might you expect that?
I don't have a time frame for it. We did part of that settlement earlier on in the year, which was a very large bill that went across to the United States, $5.5 billion. So, but what it really means is, once this is out of the way, this bank is on a definite road to recovery, and we can just concentrate on going forward as opposed to all the issues that have plagued us for so long.
So one more ugly bump in the road, effectively.
That's what I'm saying. There'll be small bumps, because we are in an environment that is ever changing in banking. But one large bump in the road, and then this bank can get back to being a much more normal bank and focusing on our customers.
Define a normal bank, Mr McEwan.
Well, one that makes money, because as I've sometimes joked that there's only one thing worse than a bank that makes lots of money, and that's a bank that doesn't make any, and we haven't made money for 10 years. So, back into normality is getting focused on our customers, making money so we can actually start looking after our shareholders as well, who have been with us for a long period of time.
What have your colleagues and what have you and your colleagues done to get it back on track?
Well, first off, there was a lot of the business that we didn't see we should take forward into a UK-focused business. We were in, when I took over, 38 countries. We're down to 16 countries, and these...
Will you stick in those now? Or
those are the areas we want to be in. They're the predominant part of our business is here in the UK and in the Republic of Ireland, and that's where our full concentration is. And that's where most of the money is, and that's where our large customer groupings are. And we've got an amazing franchise with National Westminster, the Royal Bank of Scotland, Ulster Bank, and of course Coots and a number of other brands here in the UK. So this is a really good bank that has not, we can now focus fully on going forward.
And just before we go to the first of the calls, we've talked in the past about how you might brand some of these banks, and it's widely believed that what will ultimately happen is, let me make sure I get this right, RBS vanishes from south of the border and it's NatWest, and RBS stays in Scotland, and then Ulster. Is that still,
yes,
that is the case, when are we going to see those changes?
Well, we are a bank of what we call bank of brands, with the NatWest being England and Wales, and more so, and you're seeing more and more of our sponsorships here and in England and Wales, for example. A cricket is very much a NatWest operation. Then you get up...
Done rather well as well since your logo went on those
shirts. It's been very good, hasn't it? Also up Scotland is the Royal Bank of Scotland, and more all of our branding is around the Royal Bank of Scotland, and very much in the island of Ireland, both Northern Ireland and the Republic, is Ulster Bank. What we see is RBS is the shareholder brand that sits at the top, and you'll see less and less of that as you see more and more of NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland and Ulster Bank.
Let's get to those calls, that's the idea. First up, it's Gary in Walthamstow, and you're through to Ross McEwan. Go ahead, Gary, morning to you.
Morning, Nick, morning.
Morning, Gary.
This process seems to have been going on for some while. I mean, I have some friends that work in Canary Wharf, not necessarily with RBS, but is it true that a lot of the banks are now shifting or almost duplicating their sites in readiness for a bad Brexit, that a considerable amount of staff will be moved?
Yeah, Gary, a really good question, and one, until we see the negotiated position by the government with the European Community, we won't know what position we should have. So everybody's doing their planning, and for us, for example, we've said we'll put an operation into Amsterdam if we have to. And look, we're having to plan for the worst. but obviously hoping for a very good negotiation. But unless we plan for the worst, if we get a very short period of time that we have to put an operation to look after our customers both in Europe and across here in the UK, we just won't have enough time to do it. So we're planning for the worst and hoping for the best.
How will you know if it is the worst, Mr. McEwen? What will signify that?
Well, one of the things that you have to run into is a timing factor, and I think by the end of first quarter of next year, if we don't know what the banking arrangements with Europe look like, we will probably have to start activating our plans and building the operation in Amsterdam, because
first quarter of next year.
By the end of the first quarter of next year. So it is becoming important that we get some understanding of what the arrangements will be for our customers, because we need to serve our customers. We've got 250 very large corporates in Europe, and we've got tens of thousands of UK customers who will want to operate in Europe, and they're asking us for certainty.
Are you similar to some airlines in that to operate in Europe you have to have a European base? So that an airline, for instance, if EasyJet just wants to fly from London to France, it can do it, but once it wants to start flying from France to Germany or whatever else like that, it has to have a Euro base. Are there similar restrictions in banking?
No, the current arrangements of banking is what's called passporting. If we do something in the UK, we can passport it straight into Europe, and vice versa. If there's something in Europe, it can come straight into the UK, because we're all under the same regulatory framework. But if that changes, we'll have to have an operation in Europe to look after our European customers, and also to look after our UK customers who want to trade in Europe. Therefore, we're having to make arrangements in case we don't have that, what's called passporting. We hope we continue to get it, but if we don't, we'll have an operation based in Amsterdam. And it won't be a big one, but it'll have to be there for our customers.
As a leading businessman, and has to be said a successful leading businessman, how would you characterise how Brexit negotiations have gone to date?
Look, we're not inside the negotiations, so I really couldn't tell you how they're going. The issue for me is we need some pace on it now, and as I've said, we're going to have to start moving, if we haven't got real arrangements in place by the end of 18, because I've got to look after my customers, and that's why I think its timing is really important.
Quick response from you, Gary, from what you've heard, before I move to the next call. Gary, quick response?
Just a quick response. I mean, we've been sold this thing that Brexit is almost going to be a smooth transition by the Brexiteers, and we can go off on our own and do what we like. Do you think that the British public were actually given the real information about the real implications to British jobs in leaving the EU, and why would we get the same deal being outside as we are currently in?
Well, can I say, having been somebody who was in the country when all these debates were going on, my personal view is we didn't have a really good debate.
In what way, Mr. McEwen?
So that everybody saw what could happen, what the outcome could be. And it was a very emotional debate as opposed to a fact-based debate. And I think that's what we need more of. And you're starting to see the issues coming out that I don't think that the public of the UK had any idea about.
Such as?
Well, how much is the bill that we're going to pay to come out of the European community? How much is, will we have banking arrangements across? How will, we get goods into Europe? Will we have the ability to move goods across the channel very easily? I think those are the discussions we should have had beforehand. Now, we are where we are. Let's move on. Let's get the negotiation done. The decision's made. Let's get on with it.
And lastly, before I go to the next call, hardline Remainers would say that there's a real danger that parts of the city will go to Frankfurt or go anywhere else. Really? Do you see that with the fact that so many of them speak English? We obviously happen to be at the capital of the United Kingdom. It would seem to be so much still in the city's favour, Mr. McKeown.
Look, I think so. This is a great city for financial services. And yes, you'll see some drift. The question is how much will drift. But you're already seeing the city is one of the, if not the major hub for financial services globally. Time-wise, it's great. You've got the facilities here. You've got the English language here. You've got the education here. You've got a city set up for it. So there may be some drift.
You've got the history as well. It's been so many years. Yeah.
And also the industry adapts. It's brilliant at adapting.
Ben, thanks, Gary. Ben in Edmonton. You're through to Ross McEwen. Go ahead, Ben.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. I would like to continue a little bit on this topic. With regards to Brexit, well, we've obviously seen a lot of inflation that's starting to come through here in the UK, which is kind of starting to put some pressure on the Bank of England to raise rates. Now, we've seen over in the US that they've successfully raised the rates now by 100 basis points. And given that most of the mortgage are fixed rate, it doesn't seem to have too much of an impact on the mortgage, like that type of debt market. How do you see it affecting the UK, where a lot of it seems to be variable rates, where repayments would be greatly affected by a movement of the Bank of England's rate?
You look, a really good question, Ben, and what we're seeing, the inflation, a lot of this inflation is being imported because our currency dropped 15% on the news that we were coming out of Europe. So what then happens is, as goods come into the country, they come in at a 15% increased price unless somebody's absorbing the difference. And over time, people can't absorb the difference because it hurts their profitability. But what you have here in the UK, you do have a lot of customers on fixed rates. I mean, for example, our portfolio of mortgages, which is pretty large, has only got 12% of our customers on what you call a standard variable rate that could go up, very quickly if the rates go up. The other 80+% are on a fixed rate, and most of them are on a 2 or a 5 year, so they've got certainty for that period of time. But I think what you're seeing is the Bank of England having to think about, is this inflation going to be really damaging for the country, therefore we should move interest rates up, or is it over a period of time things will stabilise? And what impact will it have on the growth of the country, which has slowed down in the last 12 months?
So what do you see happening, Ross?
Look, I think our prediction, when we just look at consensus from all the economists, is there'll be a couple of interest rate rises, maybe 3 between now and 2020. I don't think there's going to be any major movement in interest rates over the next 3 years.
And really incremental, really small.
Really small incremental.
Because it's still so precarious.
I think because there's limited growth going on in the UK. It's about 1.5 to 1.7% of growth in GDP. That's how the economy is growing. I think it is precarious, and so therefore I think if you see movements, they'll be small and they'll be very measured.
And the stewardship, lastly, we've got to go for a travel update, but the stewardship of the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, how would you count?
I think it's been incredibly good. In such a volatile time that this country's been through, I think he's been very good at managing it through, but also making sure that the regulations in place in this industry as well.
Hey Ross, thank God for the Commonwealth. You know, the Canadians who came, and a few New Zealanders as well. They've done their job in the money world, haven't they?
Well, hopefully we'll be trading back with them very shortly.
All right, let's get it's 9:16. We're off to Joanne Webb at the LBC Travel Desk.
Thanks, Nick. Well, the M25 stays closed anti-clockwise between junctions 5 at the M26 and 4 at Orpington because of an accident. And there are long delays from junction 6 at Godstone, but all the surrounding routes are still very busy. Clockwise is open but very slow from junction 3 at the M20 because of onlookers. On the North Circular Road, there's only one lane open on the westbound exit slip road at the Crooked Billet. That means it's slow from the M11. Still only one Woolwich ferry able to run because of an ongoing technical issue, and the Great Western Railway services remain suspended from Greenford to West Ealing. LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb.
I just want to say a couple of things about this.
What is the first thing?
And my problem with it is the following.
LBC at the weekend. Matt Fry.
Now, there's been a lot of talk in the Westminster Village, if you like, that when you talk about the potential leaders of the Tory party, the name no longer mentioned at the top of the list is Boris Johnson.
It is still a very real possibility that he could become the leader of the Conservative Party and at the moment Prime Minister. So I think writing him off, you have to be very careful.
Leading Britain's conversation. Matt Fry. Saturday mornings from 10 on LBC.
I got my Ford Motorcraft service. It only cost me £149, all in. Well, at least I know my Ford's in shape.
To book your Ford Motorcraft service, go to ford.co.uk. All prices are recommended retail prices and include parts, labour and VAT. Available at participating dealers only. Terms and conditions apply.
We've been thinking about the nuclear family, that vision of mum, dad and their 2.4 children, and how times have changed. How we're now living longer and our kids are leaving home later. So we thought, with all this change, shouldn't we change the way we think about mortgages? So we now cater for all types of family and are trying to turn Generation Rent into Generation Buy. Mortgages for how life is now. NatWest. We are what we do.
Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Sometimes it can be hard to keep your show on the road. But new Car Genie from the AA makes things easier. Car Genie helps predict and prevent breakdowns. Just plug it into your car and it will warn you and us if there's a potential problem. That should keep you rolling. New Car Genie from the AA. Because anything can happen. Compatible vehicles only. Check the AA.com for details.
There's no need to scream and shout. If there's a U-bend that needs straightening out,
there's a local hero for that. If your lights are leaving you in the dark, there's no need for a rude remark.
There's a local hero for that. Whether it's plumbing, heating, drains or electrics, we've got a local tradesman who can help. There's no call-out charge and all work comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee. Book online now. There's a local hero for that. Localheroes.com.
When your growing business is hiring, you don't need lots of candidates. You need the right candidates, fast. You need Indeed.com, featuring an algorithm that positions your job posts where quality candidates are and screener questions that zero in on the best talent. Post your next job on Indeed, the UK's #1 job site. For a limited time, we're giving new users a £50 credit to post a sponsored job. Claim your £50 credit at Indeed.com/redeem. That's Indeed.com/redeem. Terms, conditions and quality standards apply. The UK's #1 job site according to Comscore.
At participating Ford dealers, an MOT costs just £30 when you book it with a Motorcraft service. Book yours now at Ford.co.uk. Prices are recommended retail prices.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
We've got Ross McEwen, the boss or chief executive of the RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland Group, in taking good calls. Angela, you'll be through in just a moment. Question, though, from me, if I can, Mr McEwen. Front page of The Guardian. Hopefully you might have had sight of it, you know of the story. Banks and building societies are to carry out immigration checks on 70 million current accounts from January, in the biggest extension of Theresa May's plans to create a hostile environment for illegal immigrants in Britain, so The Guardian reports. In the first year of the checks, which will take place quarterly, they hope to identify 6,000 visa overstayers. I have to put it to you, is that the role of a bank?
Well, one of the roles of the bank is to make sure that we're dealing with people that are illegally here, should be in the country, and we can give a legitimate account to. And what we'll have to do is work with the government on how do we implement a policy of that nature, which, my biggest fear here is that we keep making it very difficult for good customers to get a bank account. And here's another check that we're going to have to go through now, and we'll work with the government to make sure that's done, because we're part of that process of not letting people have systems and process and accounts that shouldn't be in this country.
Yes,
now, remembering, I am one of these migrants, so I hope I'm not appearing on this list.
Hopefully you'll be able to get an account. If not, I have got about 20 quid on me. I might see you through the weekend. But you're right, aren't you? Because I have seen people in some of your branches, because as you're aware, I bank with one of your affiliated companies, and people and I've heard them say, why are you making it so difficult for me to get to my own money? And it's often the good guys and women who get caught up in this.
And that's why I think the use of technology will help. So if we can get the electronic feeds into the government systems so that it shows which customers shouldn't be getting accounts, and do that very quickly up front, this should make our good customers not penalised by this as well.
And you were aware of this, were you?
Yes,
you knew it was coming.
Yeah, we knew it was coming, but we need to work with the government on how do you implement a policy of that nature.
Quite
to make
an enterprise as well for you and all the banks. I mean, it's not just
well, it is, but we're having to go through the process for anti-money laundering now before we put people on, and making sure that we've got the right systems and process in place.
Let's get to those calls. Angela, you're through to Ross McEwen. Go ahead, Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hello, Nick. Hello, Ross. Lovely to be able to speak to you again. My question to you follows on from what I need to say. I'm aware that victory emails were sent by managers to West Register GRG email address when acquiring assets from distressed business customers.
Hang on, you're assuming, I'm not cutting up, you're assuming a level, GRG, do you mean this is the Global Restructuring Group, is
Correct.
it? Right, yeah, okay, so bear in mind there will be listeners, just stop you're not going, but there will be listeners who are coming very fresh to this story, Angela, so they need a little bit of background, just be aware of that. Back to you, yeah.
Okay, so these emails are described in the Policy and Procedure Manual from West Register and probably followed, or were followed, by many staff at RBS when they had dealings with GRG customers. I came forward in 2008 as a member of staff at NatWest Bank, exposing poor, negligent and criminal practice that placed many bank customers at risk. I too was on the receiving end, whereby CEO office sent emails celebrating their achievement in my dismissal.
Right. Yeah, that's what I need.
Sorry,
Thank you. Yeah,
my
go ahead.
question to you, Ross, is, can you explain why this behaviour was allowed to be rooted in your organisation, and do you believe this behaviour to be acceptable?
Now, so listeners who are starting fresh, this is what's known as the Global Restructuring Group, which had started before Mr McEwen take control, I have to say, which is subsequently now defunct, and it was stood down, but it is the subject of an FCA, Financial Conduct Authority inquiry, and it is perhaps one of the biggest blots, fair to say, on the RBS copybook. Mr McEwen, is that a fair summation?
No, that is absolutely right, and it's something that landed on my desk in the first week, I think, of being CEO. And just recently we have worked with the FCA to put together a complaints process so that any customers that were involved with GRG can go through this process, because that was one of the issues we found when we did our review. They had nowhere to go to make the complaints. So Angela's probably right there that people had nowhere to go. So we've put up a complaints process. It is a formally structured one. It has an independent third-party ex-High Court judge sitting on it. It can look at every case, and at the moment we've got about 900 people registered to put their case through. We've also done some work around, there are some things we found very early on that we wanted to put right, and one of those was there were some very complex fee structures that were charged to small, medium-sized businesses, and we've gone through now 3,500 customers and refunded over £110 million of fees, including interest rates, back to these people, because we just believed that was not the right thing to be doing. But the key thing is, where they've got problems, bring it into the complaints process now. It's working. It will take some time, because some of these go back 10 years or longer, and if they've got complaints, bring them in, please.
The Financial Conduct Authority is facing pressure from the Treasury Select Committee of MPs to publish a report into this GRG. Is the RBS resisting that?
No, we've been involved in giving information to this. Now, there's two parts to this, so for the listeners, when the regulator wants to do a review on a company, they get an independent party to do what's called Section 166. And that's a third party that comes in and independently does a review on a topic for them. And, for example, GRG, there was a 166 issued, and we had an independent party come in on behalf of the regulator and do a review. Now, that forms part of their review. It's not the whole review, and that's the report that has been leaked out there. The regulator...
Why not publish? I know it's not down to you. Why should it be published?
Yeah, can I come back to that?
Sure,
because I think it's really important.
Go ahead. Yep,
so I'm just giving the background, because there are other parts of this review that the regulator is doing themselves, the FCA. Together, that will form the review that the regulator does, so the S166 will form part of it. Now, there's been some pressure on us. Well, it's not us, it's not our report, it's the regulator's report.
You're happy for it to be published?
No, what I think is I'm happy for the summary report, i.e. their total findings to come out, not the 166. And I'll tell you why. Because
and put that in English, why the problem over the 166, and so that my listeners can come.
One, it is only part of a review, it's not the full. And secondly, every financial organisation is involved in Section 166, and they are supposed to be non-reported, i.e. for the FCA's view only. If you start putting those reports out into the marketplace, I think you change the entire nature of the review done by the regulator. That's my problem with it.
So if it's published in its entirety, the RBS would have no problems?
Yep. We're waiting for the report from the FCA of its total findings, and I think that's the important report.
But if it is seen that the bank effectively tried to take businesses to the verge of bankruptcy to earn better fees and better cash out of them, that's absolutely grotesque, Mr McEwen.
But it's also showed in the summary piece that the FCA did about 12 months ago, that was not the case. So I think this is why we need to see the full report as opposed to just the 166.
Let's go to, thank you for your call, Angela. We've got time for at least one more. Sam in Brentwood. Sam, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hello, Sam.
Hi, Sam.
Hello. I worked in the retail banking industry for about 7 years, so I did experience customers from all different ranges of walks of life, so customers very wealthy, customers not so wealthy. My question is really, we're living in a world with interest rates that are so low, so mortgages are great, but savings are so poor, there's really no incentive to actually save now. Where is the happy medium? If the interest rates go up, then obviously our mortgage customers are going to be crippled because their mortgage is going to be so much more expensive. But then there's still the look of disgust on so many customers' faces when they ask me how much money will they get on their interest for 2 years on £100,000, and I'm going, right, well, you're going to get 0.5% providing you don't touch it at all. You know, where is the happy medium there?
Let's put the question.
Well, Sam, you've touched on a point that all those people who have saved for a long, long period of time are getting next to no interest because there's so much money around, and the actual Reserve Bank and its how it wants the interest rate. It wants the money in circulation. It wants it invested. It wants it put into other investments as opposed to sitting in banks. But you're right. At some point in time, the interest rates, as the economy improves, will start to drift up again. And those people who've done their saving and want to hold it into a bank will get something back for it. It's been very, very tough on people who've had money and want it safely tucked away in a bank. It has been very hard. The only thing that goes for it, though, is inflation has also been very low over this period of time.
Is that going to hold?
Well, you're seeing it increasing at the moment because of the currency depreciation, but I think over time it'll sit around quite a low level for some time still.
And will the pound find a slightly better level against the euro and the dollar?
I wouldn't give a prediction on the pound. I wouldn't give you that advice.
All right, John, thanks. Last call, we've got a minute. John in Seaford. John, you're through to Ross McEwen. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Nick. Good morning,
Morning,
Mr. McEwen. Yes, I recently went into my NatWest branch requesting a non-contactless credit card. They told me that NatWest is not issuing a non-contactless card. Can you explain why you're not offering this proper service to your customers?
Well, look, every time we put a variation, we've got about 80 different variants of cards out there at the moment, John. And really it's up to you to use it either contactless or non-contactless. You don't have to pull it out and use it against a contactless facility. So, you know, it's every time somebody wants something different, we end up with a big cost structure that runs through it for every customer.
I mean, what the Chief Executive is saying is just use it as a regular card, don't go contactless, lastly, John.
Exactly.
No?
Well, I appreciate that, but also you must accept that all other banks, or most other banks, are offering the service for either a contactless or a non-contactless card.
Yeah, look, one of the things that's happening, John, more and more, our customers are demanding and looking for the ability to use, be it their card or their phone, for making payments, and that is what's coming. You're seeing it now through all the transport systems where you can, you know, use your contactless card to make payments. And I think that is the way things are going. So it's the good balance between existing customers, what they want, and what our future customers are after. Happy to look at it, but John, for you, and see why we're not giving it. But at this stage, most of our customers are wanting contactless.
John, thank you. Just before I let you go, I tease you sometimes about the fact that you've come up from New Zealand. There was a report recently that you might be going home. Well, not quite home, but closer to home. You're in the line to be taking over the Commonwealth Bank of Australia in, obviously, Australia. Mr. McEwen, are we going to lose you?
Look, I'd miss out on coming and seeing you, Nick.
I'll come down to Sydney, mate. I'm happy to do that.
Look, there's plenty left to do here, and lots to do with this organisation to get it back in great shape.
You're ruling yourself out?
I am saying right now that I'm staying here to actually finish the job off.
No interest in the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where you were so successful until you came up here?
Look, it's a great bank, and it is a great bank down in Australia. It's got some issues that it's dealing with now, and I'm sure they'll get through those.
The ball came out from the back of the scrum?
We fed it out to the half-back.
You might have a look.
No, I've got plenty to do here. Thanks.
Ross McEwen, pleasure having you as ever. Thank you. Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Bank of Scotland, here on LBC when News is next.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation.